Okay, hey everybody. Thanks for joining. My name is Josh. I'm on the DAOstack community team, and a number of the community team folks are on the Hangout as well, along with Matan Field, CEO and lead architect of DAOstack. So we have a little AMA session today, and we're doing it a little bit differently than we did last week. Last week we invited you to the AMA itself, to the Hangout itself. We're not doing that because there's a limit on the number of people who can join a Hangout. And just going to mute some noise here. And so if any of you have a suggestion on how we can work around that, we'd be happy to hear it. If we can actually have more people on a Hangout, that's fine. But for now, what we did is we gave the YouTube link out to the community. So you all are watching live on YouTube. And if you have questions or comments during the call, just interact with us through our community Telegram, which is the handle of the Telegram group is DAOstack Community. So if you're already in Telegram, you can just go to DAOstack Community. Or if you want a handy link to get there, it's t.me/DAOstack Community. So that's where we'll be taking questions and comments during this call. So hello, Matan. Thanks for doing this once again. We really enjoyed last week and looking forward to today. So let's start with a question that we didn't get to right at the end of our call last week about implementation and use cases. This is from Crypto Danny on the forum. She says, or he or she says, we're interested in building dApps on top of DAOstack. Will there be documentation in the library to help us? Will there be tutorials, written or video? And how do you envision collaboration with your busy core team happening?
So, okay, firstly, thanks for the question and for wanting to collaborate. So firstly, in terms of use cases, maybe just to mention, there are many, many different use cases, and probably most of them we haven't thought about yet. Nevertheless, I think from the tens of use cases that I've ever, either thought about or spoke with people about, I could put all of them into 4 categories. So it's good to have in mind those four categories. So all these applications that I'm aware of are either of the type of collaboration, so decentralized organization that collaborate and build something together, open source developers like Wikipedia like, etc. The second is basically management of assets. So in the first, the decision is about the distribution of ownership and power and budget to different agents, different actors that collaborate. The second is about asset management. So decentralized VC, decentralized pension, decentralized insurance network. And their decision is about allocating funds for certain purposes. The third category is curation. So Google is a curation engine for websites. Yelp is a curation engine for restaurants, TripAdvisor, Booking, all of those, even to some extent Reddit. I mean, some other applications also have curation component to them. So curation, decentralized curation networks is the third category. And the fourth category is marketplaces. Although the fourth category doesn't have to have governance system in order to operate. So everything that is marketplace, there is basically peer-to-peer. Ride sharing is a marketplace. E-commerce is a marketplace. So everything that's in marketplace doesn't have to have governance. So these are kind of just a map for use cases, just to have in mind. Now, in terms of integration, we've designed the way that we designed the architecture was exactly to put in front of us this notion of basically making integration as easy as possible. So it's rather, the whole philosophy was instead of building it's not that we're not also building product, but more than we want to build products, we want to enable building products. It's kind of more, I would say, prior. So for that, we've put a lot of emphasis on the easiness of integration. That's why we build ArcJS, which basically makes everything that can be done with Arc, which is the core of the governance engine, collective decision-making engine, organization engine. this WordPress of DAO that we mention all the time. So everything that can be accessed on Arc can be accessed through ArcJS in a much simpler way. I mean, both simpler in the sense of JavaScript rather than Solidity, but also simpler in terms of not needing to understand the architecture of contracts that you actually need to understand when you interact with Arc. In terms of documentation, so I mean, for a long time we've worked on code with none, and just in the recent, I think, 2 to 3 months, we put a lot of emphasis on documentation. So I can guarantee one thing: the derivative looks very well. So which means that I think there is like 10x progress in documentation than we had 3 months ago, which is to say that we hope and we'll try to make it another 10x in the next 3 months or so. So it's getting better and better, but also to admit that right now it's not as it should be. Soon, so there is there is very good documentation, but perhaps no perfect hello world guiding tool kind of thing that helps integrate on your own. In terms of integration, in terms of collaboration with our dev team, which is indeed busy, but that's a good question, which I think we should put more attention to. And I suggest actually to ourselves to take it as an action item, like what would be the right channel for that. Probably Telegram is not the right channel, or the forum. So maybe we can make a kind of Slack-like kind of channel for that, like people who actually want to directly interact with the team to get more information about the integration. So I think that could be a good action item for us right now. And was there another question in there? Remember, Josh?
Checking. Yeah, I think we covered it. Tutorials in collaboration with the busy core team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the only way actually to scale up information is by really, I mean, it's kind of exponential curve, right? Like there is, maybe 2 people know a lot of information, then they kind of transfer this information to another 4, but then this 4 transfer to another 8, and so on and so forth. So initially, in the beginning, it looks that it goes slowly, but then at some point it will accelerate because it's exponential. So I think we are close to the to the knee of the exponent, where more and more people are and understand the architecture and everything.
Yep. Okay. All right. Thanks. And just as far as how we're thinking about this call,
can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
Actually, I want to use this as an invitation. Like anyone that wants to take it as a journey. So, like for example, going with a team, working with a team, and getting to deeply understanding the architecture and everything that needs to be understood in order to integrate, and then to do the best documentation he or she found that was the thing that was missing. We would offer we would see that as a great value, and we would offer in return a great value back. So I would like to use it as an invitation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, makes sense. So Matan, we're thinking to spend maybe the first third of the call on use cases and implementation questions, and then we have a couple in the area of product and the DAOstack, and then there are a number of governance questions, governance and theory questions, which hopefully we'll have time for in the second half of the call. So continuing with use cases and implementation, the next question in some ways is similar, but maybe just to clarify, actually setting up a collective. No, Matan? Here he is.
Yeah, is it on my end, the internet is slow?
I think so. Other people seemed still stable,
okay.
So you disappeared. Okay. Did you hear the question?
No, I didn't.
Okay, but you heard I said we're going to split the call about 3 ways?
Yes.
Okay, great. So along the same lines about use cases and implementation, this one is less about app integration, but more about using the DAOstack to set up a collective. What are the best resources to learn how to do that?
So, I mean, that's exactly the purpose of the first interface that we've built, Alchemy. But in order to put out so two things. Firstly, to put out an app that as soon as possible, and secondly, to direct to a specific use and specific audience. So although we wanted to develop a full suite for for foundation and management of collective, we started with a little bit narrower use case of decentralized budgeting or asset allocation for open source projects. So that is to say that Alchemy would be that tool to found a collective. It will be partially suitable for that in the coming months, and more so, I would say, in the coming 3 months. Beyond that, I think that one way to start kind of like preparing or moving forward with this would be to understand the governance protocols. There is a large dimension of space of governance protocols, and I think it's good to understand like the domain, and then to start prepare or choose different governance protocols that suit for different collectives. We are right now mostly designing protocols for large organizations, so the ability to interact with thousands of open source developers effectively. But of course, it's very different if you want to make a collective of 20 people that are running a food cooperative, for example.
Right.
So I think that kind of right. I mean, eventually, not very far in the future, all of this will be part of the application. You'll be able to configure your governance protocol with a few clicks of a button. But right now, it's good to kind of like learn the domain and make the right choices, and of course, interact with any of us to make these choices, learn about it, about the existing resources, and prepare for that. But yeah, we'll probably be more mature for these kind of, I think, ventures in about 3 months from now.
Yep. Okay. All right. Great. Let's move to a couple questions in the area of the DAOstack and product. So speaking about Arc, Don asks, how is Arc upgradable? Is there a vote? Who has the say in that?
Oh, that's very good. So is it possible to share a screen or not?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. I think there is here. Yeah, I have a screen share.
Okay. Yeah, you can do it.
Okay. Let me share screen. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Let me just speak a couple of slides. Can you see that now?
Yes.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, great.
So if you see, so this is Arc, or this is actually not really Arc, but this is the thing that can be built on Arc. So this is what we call smart company. So, or if you want, the atomic unit of governance. So maybe let me tell you a little bit how it works. So each component here is actually a smart contract. This is like a bundle of smart contracts. These are the all these together is the governance protocol. So basically, every governance can be divided into do's and don'ts. So the do's is basically if such and such will happen, if let's say 50% majority of reputation holders will vote yes on a proposal, then the proposal will be executed. So this is a do. And the don'ts looks like no matter what happens, we'll never print more than 1 million tokens, or no matter what happens, we'll never burn more than $100,000 a month. And then the don'ts can even define in them which do's can change them. So no matter what happens, we'll never burn more than $100,000 a month, but governance scheme logic number 6 can change myself. So, for example, only if 80% of token holders vote yes, I can be changed. So we call them governance schemes and global constraints. So these are the rules of the organization. And then there is the actors of the organization. This is like a governance unit. A DAO can be a large multiplicity of those. So the actors, the top actors are the internal actors. So the above one is the token, basically, in a way, distributing ownership of this governance unit. Then the second one is the reputation, distributing voting power in this governance unit. And then the third is the external agent. So it's kind of like the external actor. So it can do anything that can be done on the blockchain. So that contract can, on behalf of the governance unit, can, for example, vote in another contract, another unit, or call any function on any contract in the blockchain. So basically, it's most general. And then the controller is just the intermediator between the logics and the actors. And it also includes the logics that this governance unit is subscribed to. Now there are 3 dots on the bottom of the controller. So these are 3 functions that can also be triggered beyond the token, reputation, and what we call avatar, the face. So the 3 dots, one of them is the function to change the governance rules, the governance schemes. So if these are governance schemes, I mean the right ones are the governance schemes, then the first dot can change them. So there is basically, which means that there are rules to change the rules. So for example, maybe only governance scheme number 4 can actually register new governance scheme or unregister old ones. And then the second dot is the changer of global constraints. And again, so there might be particular rules to change the global constraint. And finally, the last dot is the thing that transfer ownership of the actors. So these actors are completely owned. It's called own in Solidity, completely owned by the controller, which means that only the controller, that's the only contract that can command on these contracts and call them and basically tell them what to do. So this controller can decide to transfer that ownership to a new contract, perhaps a new controller or a completely different architecture. So by definition, any governance unit has the rules to change the rules, but also has the rules to transfer ownership into a completely new architecture, or perhaps a new controller, and by that make a full upgrade of the system. So in that sense, the rules themselves call also the rules to upgrade the governance protocol as well as upgrade the technology itself, the architecture itself.
Okay, all right, thanks, Matan. So a related question maybe then is, so if developers can contribute governance modules, can you explain how they will be rewarded for their contributions?
Right, so that's a good question. So there are, well, generally 2 simple ways to think about it, and one of them is already built in the system, and the other one will be, I think, developed in the future. So the first way is that us, DAOstack, is a project that wants to be a DAO itself. So the first thing that we are going to do is to found a DAO on top of the DAOstack. We're going to call it the Genesis DAO. And it's going to use the Gen tokens. Now, this DAO, its purpose is to build the DAOstack ecosystem, or the DAO ecosystem, on top of the DAOstack. Now, one of the ways that it does so, not the only way, but one of the ways that it does so is by rewarding any sort of, I call it, anti-rival contribution to the ecosystem. So anyone that makes a contribution of components to the stack, or even founding a project that enhance the ecosystem, then the Genesis DAO will basically, I mean, anyone can make a proposal for any reward, but basically the Genesis DAO will reward that contributor for their contribution of value. So that's already right now or soon as we found the Genesis DAO in the coming months. So this is the immediate, I think, way that developers will be contributed. I mean, both in I mean, the DAO, basically the Genesis DAO will basically manage both Ether from the fundraise as well as Gen tokens. So 40% of the economy is reserved for the DAO, for that Genesis DAO to manage. The second way is of course by more market forces, but that may come up in the future, whereas there will be like inherent business model. So think of about the possibility of having like this kind of like app store of governance modules, in a way that if you produce a governance module, there is some business model around it. But right now, we're not starting with it right now.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Great. So this is a question from Clive that is about the DAOstack, but also transitions us into more of territory around governance and theory. What safeguards will be built into DAOstack to protect against the tyranny of the majority?
So, yeah, I mean, firstly, in any DAO, the best protection from the tyranny of majority is called fork. So basically, if you don't agree with the majority, you just need to fork out. Now, it's true that, I mean, you can fork a network, but you cannot fork a fund, right? I mean, the fund is still held by. But however, you can fork. I mean, if you know, if large number of agents that also holds fund or tokens, and they fork, they can basically sell their tokens in the first DAO and then fork into a new DAO. So I think the best, basically, and I would say the way that it comes into DAOstack is that, you know, in a lot of previous communities or projects, fork is considered a bad thing. It's something to be avoided. And we're thinking about it just as the opposite. Like, we're thinking that fork is a good thing. We should make fork as easy as possible. So I'm not speaking about fork at the blockchain level. I mean, that can also happen, but it's not our deal. I'm speaking about the fork of a DAO. So if there is a DAO, we actually would like to promote the forkability to be an easy function. I mean, if it doesn't mean that the thing will dissolve fastly, because if you fork and nobody follow you, clearly it's not effective. But if you fork and half of the DAO or even 1/10 of the DAO is following you, then you should fork. So I think that's the best protection of tyranny of majority. And well, beyond that, I would say that I mean, it's basically really acknowledging that, you know, there are different value systems and they are both good to live in parallel to each other. And there's no reason why to enforce one on the other. And they can even cooperate. So that's the main. I would say, yeah, I think we can stay with that.
We do have a number of questions coming up about reputation, and I thought maybe first you'd like to say something about token and reputation.
Sure. So token is a fungible token. You can transfer it. If you own it, you own it. Nobody can take it from you. It can reflect anything. So it can reflect, if it has a market, if it has a liquid market, then in a way it reflects cash. On the other hand, if it's tied to a business model of an organization, then it's kind of like reflection of ownership in a way, in a sense, but not really. If it reflects a usage of an application, it's reflect utility, etc. But there are a lot of different ways to reflect value in a token. So there's no like one singular way. And reputation is similar to a token, but it's not fungible. You cannot transfer it. So you can accumulate it on an address, but you can never transfer it to another address. And then because of that, then also it can be taken from you. So it's like if the organization decide that some agent should be taken reputation, then it can do that. So it's like token in the sense that it keeps its balance. There is a balance to each agent. So one agent has 6 and another agent has 8, etc. So there is a balance that everyone can see. But then it's not transferable, and it's not like protected, or how do you say, like the organization that managed that balance can also take it away from you. These are the two differences. And generally we think about reputation. So maybe it's a little bit confusing, and we for a long time we thought we try to come up with a different a name. So also inviting anyone to think about it. But basically, when we say reputation, we really have in mind something like voting power, like power inside governance unit.
Yeah, so maybe this is, you're already answering a question that Ezra had. Ezra, I see you have a live question, but first I'm going to ask Matan something that you left ahead of time because it's relevant. Ezra says, reputation seems like an endless positive feedback loop. Reputation-rich people will be incentivized to vote for decisions that will grant themselves even more reputation, and they'll have the power to do it. Too much lopsidedness here could even endanger the decentralization of a DAO, as it would in effect be centralized around the few super rich reputation holders. Possibly a solution to this could be limiting how much power reputation can provide. Any thoughts on that, Matan?
Yeah. So firstly, I want to say that I mean, probably it's not the first time. It's definitely not the first time. Probably not the last time. The reason why we built Arc the way we built it is just because we believe there is no right single protocol. There is no such thing. Different organizations will need different protocols, and more so protocols will need to evolve over time and fine-tune themselves. So yeah, some organization might limit reputation, and that's why we built Arc the way we built it, because it's very easy. If you just want to add that, it's super easy. It's almost trivial to implement it. So with the architecture that I showed before. So probably some organization will limit reputation, some others will not. It's true that it might create a feedback loop. I would say it in different words, that basically it will trigger, or it will move towards increasing alignment. So those who are aligned with the majority will become more aligned. I mean, will have more reputation, and thus will be more important in the consensus, and thus even increasing alignment. And those who are not in line with majority will have less reputation, and thus will basically pushed out from the alignment. But that's not necessarily bad, because again, but then if you're one of those who are not aligned with the majority, you can just fork out and just have a new value system where you are the majority initially. Then other people are following you or aligned with you, and then there's like a multiplicity of vectors, multiplicity of value systems that really think differently and then compete in a way with each other about achieving goals in the world. Maybe they want to achieve different goals, or they want to achieve the same goals differently in different ways. So in that sense, yes, I mean, if you're creating increasing alignment, it's not necessarily bad, because then forkability will create multiplicity of increasing alignment. Yeah, we can discuss even more that. I mean, the other force that is balancing increasing alignment is that it's like growing the organization. The more and more people are coming, so on one hand you're creating increasing alignment, but on the other hand you get more and more agents that think differently. So it's kind of like balancing out these forces as well. And yes, and then again, some organization will decide maybe because they have, they don't want to encourage forkability, and they want to not encourage also increasing too much homogenization of the organization, and thus they will, for example, limit reputation. Yes, you can do it in many different ways.
A couple of questions that are similar. Can reputation be staked since it can't be transferred? Somebody else asks, can someone vouch for one another, thus transferring, yet at the same time staking his reputation?
So I'm not 100% sure what's the intention of the, like what each of these words meant, but basically, so in terms of staking, so yes, when you again, that depends on protocol. Different protocols behave differently. Yep. But some protocols, under some protocols that will be available on the stack, when you vote, you actually stake your reputation. So whenever you vote on something, you put your reputation on stake, if you're voting according to the majority, then your reputation will increase. If you're voting not according to the majority, your reputation will decrease. So that's in that sense, you're staking your reputation. In terms of vouching, I'm not completely sure what is the meaning of that. I mean, you can, if you're asking if you can delegate, if the question is whether a vote can be delegated, so definitely yes, you can delegate. You can delegate to someone else your reputation. It's not transference of the reputation, just delegating the power for under certain condition or for certain time frame or whatever is decided.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, vouch cannot. Maybe also vouch is the meaning behind vouch is that someone doesn't have reputation, then I vouch for him and he gets reputation. So again, that will be defined in the protocol of that organization. However, note that just vouching, just me vouching someone else is not a resilient protocol. I mean, I can vouch to another agent, which is me, and then I vouch to another agent, which is me, etc., and just increase my reputation. So yes, you can build. So if that's the meaning, then it's a really good question. Some organization would like to build vouching mechanism. It's a challenge to build a decentralized vouching mechanism. It's also Sybil resistant, so resistant to this kind of attack that I just mentioned. But I think it's possible. So yeah, some protocols, for example, will have this kind of decentralized vouching and Sybil resistant protocols.
Okay. All right. Thanks. So it's a few minutes past the half of the hour. Would you like to take a couple more questions?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So Julian asks, if I submit a proposal and I have to pay in Gen for this proposal to be reviewed by the community, what's the advantage of submitting a proposal if I have to pay? And maybe even saying something about just the Gen as relates to submission of proposals.
Yeah. So there is no need, at least right now. And again, that they may vary, but with the decision of people. But basically, right now there is no need to pay Gen for submitting a proposal. So submitting of proposal is free. And again, that can be changed or decided differently by any organization. But right now, the default is a submission of proposal is free. So now the question, what is the role of Gen? So in order to answer the question maybe more deeply, we need to understand the role of Gen.
Yep.
So basically, I described into some details, not fully, last time, the problem of decentralized governance and its solution that we are suggesting and that we call holographic consensus. So basically, let me try to summarize that in 2 sentences. So organizations are this kind of it's an engine to make decisions, right? And by that, coordinate a number or large number of agents, actors into co-action. So when you speak about decentralized organization, you think about distribution of power for those votes. But the problem is that if you distribute the power to influence the vote, then if you demand too much of majority, too much of attention, collective attention, to approve each and every decision, then you have a resilient system, but very not scalable. You cannot grow effectively the organization and process more and more decisions. But then if you only require very little reputation to approve each and every decision, it's very scalable, but not very resilient. So a small group can basically kidnap the DAO, if you want, or just make wrong decisions, like decisions that are not aligned with the DAO.
Yep. On
the other hand, markets are very, very effective, and they scale very well, and they grow. They're becoming more and more effective as they grow. Just the opposite from organizations. So, because of that, people realize that maybe you can relate markets and decisions and make that effective decision making. And people have explored that using prediction markets for decision making. It's called future key. The problem with future key, as I see it, is twofold. So firstly, because markets are pure economics, it cannot capture different value systems. I mean, some value system would like to, to put in values, not just value. So like different values, and pure economic markets cannot capture that well. That's the first downside. And the second downside is that markets are, well, they are more manipulable because, you can purchase tokens and then you can manipulate the market. And that happens all the time. So, and in the centralized organization, there is no regulation. So if it's manipulable, it can be really attacked. So the point is to realize that in governance, there are two different functionalities. There is the decision-making, and then there is the sense-making, the signaling. Mm-hmm. So markets are really good in sense-making and signaling, but they are not very well for decision-making. And organizations are very good in decision-making, but are not well in effective signaling. So what we did, we separate the two. There is both governance, that is decisions that are made by voters, by reputation holders, and there is prediction markets. There's prediction markets. There is a prediction market basically for each DAO of people that can make prediction about the fate of proposals. But those predictions are made by agent that does not need to be part of the DAO. So anyone can come into any DAO and make a prediction about any proposal. And by that, he's willing to put a stake on it. Like he's willing to put $200 that this decision will pass or fail. So by that, firstly, if he's a good predictor, he's good at making profit. If he's a bad predictor, he's losing his money, his stake. But by doing so, basically, he's signaling the network for the interesting proposal, for the interesting decision. And by that, making the collective attention much more efficient, it can navigate more securely and effectively into the right decisions. So it's both serving the DAO and serving the people that are doing that. And that's, we call that holographic consensus. This whole protocol that I'm just kind of like hinting for. I'm not describing the whole protocol. Now, it's important to say that all of the DAOs will basically be, there is like a single universal background of prediction market going on top of them, and this whole prediction market is basically done in Gen. So you don't need to pay for making a proposal, but if you want to accelerate your proposal, you can promote it by putting a stake. And it's a stake because if eventually you are right, if eventually the proposal will pass, you'll even gain more back. Mm-hmm. But if you can think about it also in different directions. You can think about purchasing the collective attention. But if you're purchasing collective attention and then using it improperly, so that eventually the proposal doesn't pass, then you're losing your stake. And This is the use of the Gen token.
Yeah. So just want to make sure did we fully answer that question? I think so. Okay, great. So let's then talk a little bit, just taking a live question here from Ezra. I'm not a developer, an investor, or a journalist, and there's no way my company will be converting into a DAO in the near future. What is the best way for me to get involved in DAOstack and the movement it represents in general?
Well, I mean, yeah, you named some of the core features, attribute like contributions, investment fund, developing, writing articles, but you can participate in any other functionality, right? There are a few more functionalities in the system, and basically any of them. I mean, for example, if you really believe in the project and want to spread it, just telling your friends about it is just, maybe perhaps the best thing that can be done. Being on the Telegram, asking questions, actually just asking that question is also already contributional. Right. So asking questions on the forum, any sort of educating yourself or educating others is super useful. Sometimes the best contribution of someone is just bringing another person that is just the perfect person for the project, suggesting ideas, learning. I think eventually everything starts from learning. Like if you're in a process of learning, then by definition you're also in the process of learning how you can make a contribution. So
we've gotten a similar question in the past, Matan, and one thing that you've said is that in small organizations or individuals that are not in position to form themselves as a DAO are still very eligible to participate in the DAO ecosystem and the DAO mesh.
Sure. So as a user, you can definitely promote the DAO ecosystem as a user. And now maybe it's early days, so we haven't yet launched. We'll launch this coming months, but even when it's launched, I assume that in the early days it will be more for early adopters. So maybe we're actually aiming to make it pretty useful also for people that are not developers. But yet, I'm ready to, I'm taking the assumption that early days are more for early adopters that have maybe a little bit more tech background, but not necessarily. But definitely in the very near future, it will be accessible for a much wider audience. And one great contribution is just using the system and in different ways.
Yeah. Okay, you still want a question, or shall we wrap, Matan?
I'm good.
Okay, so this question is about the DAO mesh and the interoperability of DAOs. Assuming that DAOs can use schemes, offers, or proposals, or whatever we decide to call them, to make deals and communicate with one another, what is the actual advantage of this DAO interoperability versus two employees at different legacy organizations communicating with one another?
Yeah, that's a good question. So firstly, let me just mention that when we speak about interoperability, there are two levels. So just to note that. There is the interoperability of dApps and the interoperability of DAOs. So there is the stack, right? There is the Arc, and then the archives, the registries, and then the ArcJS. And then on top of that, there could be very large number of dApps that should be interoperable. So this is the analogy to what happens in the internet, right? Nobody tried to build the internet. People just built HTTP, and then the internet emerged. So just as all web applications on the internet are by definition interoperable because they are all communicating with one universal open HTTP protocol, in the same way, all different different collaborative decentralized applications on the stack would be interoperable thanks to Arc and also to archives. So it's two different layers of interoperability. But then there is a second notion of interoperability, which is about DAO interoperability, as you mentioned, like how different groups could communicate and make business relationship. Now, true, it's not. This is not. Philosophically, if you wish, it's not different from different businesses in the world making communication. What makes it different is a couple of things. So, firstly, because of the fact that the rules of a DAO are pretty much programmatic, not pretty much, are totally programmatic, and then every node. So you can have a DAO, and within DAO there are like a fractal structure, like companies and sub-companies and sub-companies, and it doesn't have to be even a tree structure. It can be of a totally generic graph network. But each node can be autonomous. So a unit over here, even though it's part of a larger DAO, can just decide to interact with unit over here. And that's not exactly like if you're a department in a big organization, not necessarily you would be able to, regulation-wise, you would not be able to maybe interact with another department of another large organization. It will go, and again, that's because of the centralized structure, right? Everything critically needs to go through the center to be approved and go back. So that's why it doesn't happen. And also there is no strong way to align interest, where here the whole intention is for different DAOs to actually have strong alignment of incentives because they are part of a bigger DAO ecosystem that is constantly promoting anti-rival economy, anti-rival behavior. So that's one way to think about it. The second way to think about it is simply because you have like a whole internet of work. Mm-hmm. It also makes the discoverability like 100x more efficient.
Yeah.
So today, there are like tons of units all over the world, but you're not aware of them. There's no Google for the world of work, right? Mm-hmm. But here, that's exactly what's happening. If we are building an internet for work, there will also be that Google of work, So discoverability will be highly enhanced. So in that sense, it will also be different. So I think it will make a big difference in terms of interoperability of workforces.
And part and parcel to that discoverability would be curation. So let's go to this question from Kton9. Right. From what I understand, with DAOstack, it would be relatively easy to set up a curation market.
Yes, basically the whole purpose of DAOstack is to make it easy to build any sort of collective engine, collective decision engine. Or now, however, I want to say two things. Firstly, I mean, curation market is a hot topic these days, but on the other hand, it's a very there is no one definition that goes under curation market. There's many different things that people call curation markets. Mm-hmm. So that's one comment. And secondly, there is curation market and there is curation networks, which behave differently. And again, as I said, markets, if it's literally a market, a pure market, then by definition it has no collective decision making. It makes decision purely economically by the market. Mm-hmm. and it's purely peer-to-peer. And in that sense, you don't need really DAOstack as much as you would have otherwise. If it's a curation network that can make collective decisions about curation, then absolutely yes, you can easily make it on DAOstack, and you probably need something of this sort anyway. So this is like different between curation networks and curation markets. And more so, I would suggest, just as I said about holographic consensus, that for a long time people have looked at just consensus or just economics, future key, and I argue that the solution is actually a hybrid of them. So the same thing I would say about curation market. I think just curation market or just curation network will not be effective, and the other will not be resilient. And the right solution will be a curation network market. So basically, the analogy of holographic consensus for
right.
curation.
Right. And so just to reiterate the question specifically, would you say that with DAOstack it would be relatively easy to set up a curation?
Yeah. More so, I would say that the whole purpose is that it's built in a modular way, in general way, such that I would assume that, although we haven't yet done that, that's definitely on our roadmap. But I would assume that the structure that are already put in place for collaboration will almost be identical or easily tweakable to get for the curation category. So it's almost given, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, related then might be something like Travis's question. What would be the advantages of beginning with the stack when the use cases and the ways that teams and nodes operate and interact isn't yet clear, but is rather being defined?
What is the upside? What is the advantage?
What's the advantage of beginning with the stack if the use cases and ways and nodes and interaction mechanisms are not yet clear, they're being defined?
Yeah, I mean, I would think that this is the question for any new technology, right? Like the downside, of course, is that there's much more friction, and the upside is that you have the huge advantage of first mover. You could say the same thing on Ethereum, right? Like those who try to code anything on Ethereum a couple of years ago or 3 years ago was super hard. It wasn't clear what can be done or how can be done. There was no integrated environments. It was super hard. And then also the progress was very slow. But then, of course, they got so much educated that when things got easier, they had a huge advantage, and nowadays they are leading the space. So I would think that would be true for any technology.
I love this answer, but I also think that Travis is actually asking something slightly different.
Okay.
I think he's asking about when in his own organization, the use case, the ways that teams and nodes operate and interact isn't yet clear. Does it still make sense to begin on the stack?
I see. Thanks for the clarification. Yeah, I mean, I think, that's a good question. I mean, I would say that the whole power of programmatic cooperation is that there is much less to discuss about. Like there is a rules for the game, and either people want to play with it or not. So I mean, if you start, an organization with those rules, and if people don't play, they don't play, and then you're left with a smaller organization. If people play, there is nothing to discuss about. I mean, basically, ideally, it's kind of like stigmergy, where ants are not discussing how to build, their way from food to the nest. They're just algorithmically cooperating. So that's kind of like the same. I would argue that on small scale cooperation and large scale cooperation are dramatically different, physically different. Like when I say physically different, I mean having different rules of physics, laws of physics. And I would say that, oh wait, my computer tells me that it's going to start in 53, 52 seconds. Don't do that. Oh my God. So, so I think that basically small scale cooperation should be social, and a lot of discussions, let's say, and large scale cooperation should be asocial. It's more like economics. It should be no discussion. It should be a lot of people expressing their opinion, and something happens. So in that sense, programmatic cooperation fits. You don't need to define. You don't need to understand anything. You can just start it, and either people play the game or not.
Right.
And then anyone can say, okay, but I don't like those rules of game. I make new rules of game, and great. Now you have two organizations. Maybe later they can merge. Any sort of evolution can happen.
Okay, live follow-up question from Cleve, and we've got two more, this one included. Thank you for your earlier answer. This was the answer in which you mentioned safeguards and tyranny and forking. The question is, in situations where a DAO has forked, is there a mechanism for them to rejoin one another? For example, if a minority solution is proven correct, can the majority dissent be reversed?
Yeah, definitely. Any sort of logic that you can imagine can be implemented, right? If you just said that in terms of in words of rules, that those rules can be coded and are easily coded on the stack. That's why it's built modularly. So yes, the answer is yes. You can, just as you fork organizations, you can merge organizations, and you can combine them in different ways. You can combine them in a way that just add like a total sum. You can combine them in different combinations that maybe keeps on their autonomy. So when you think of these two organizations, you can combine them in the way that there is a larger organization that both of them become subsystems of the larger, or you can literally just combine them into one organization. And there are more ways you can think about it. So the answer is yes, and everything you can think about, just know that you can translate to words and you can translate word to code. So.
Okay, Matan, last one for today from Living Beings. When will DAOstack launch in a form that I can use to build a custom DAO?
So we are launching this month. I mean, we're launching a pre-MVP this week on the mainnet. This coming week. And by the end of the month, I believe that we'll have like an MVP version in which still for some time we try to think whether to firstly go after the customization of DAO, or firstly about the usability of fully customized DAO. So initially we went the first direction, and then we turned to the second direction. So now we are in the second, which means that the first application, you can still open a DAO, but it's fully customized. Like you cannot fine tune anything. It's just built. There is one kind of DAO that you can build, one protocol, and then that DAO can do some things that we think are already valuable for real existing organizations. So basically, decentralized budgeting of open source projects. And then the next step is exactly, one of the next steps is exactly to add this configurability. And I think it's the very near future. Like we're speaking about, 1 month ahead, 2 months ahead, 3 months max. And the beauty of it is that the decentralized budgeting engine, Alchemy, we can use it to build more stuff. So, you think that configurability, or actually, I will agree with you, that configurability is, one of the most important feature of Next. Then you can just make a proposal to the DAO that will be founded on Alchemy with real budget, with real money, and you can make a proposal. I suggest to do the next feature to do configurability and to allocate such funds to that, and maybe I'm also willing to build that, and etc. And then if that approved, there is also a budget for that, and people will start working on it. So that's exactly what I'm planning to do, to just make a lot of proposals for next features once Alchemy is launched on the mainnet with real money.
Okay, I think we're ready to close there. Matan, anything else you'd like to say?
No, it's exciting. I'm happy. I mean, there's so many questions, and yeah, I mean, I think it's a good discussion. I would have loved it to see. I mean, I don't know if it's technologically possible, but if we could, all of us be on a real conversation, actually hear people asking and re-asking, maybe not agreeing, maybe, or not understanding, or anything, just like reiterating, I think would be much more fun and deeper. But yeah, if we find a technological solution for that, it'd be great.
Okay, we can look into it. All right.
Great, thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you, Matan, and thank you, everybody, for coming. And we'll see you in the community. Have a great day or evening.
Bye.